I got a Gene Keys video for you today about the sphere of EQ. If you've been following along, I've been going sphere by sphere throughout the Golden Path. First, let me address the elephant in the room. I live in South Carolina. It's hotter than a camel's balls outside. You guys get to see my chest here. And since that's the case, maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Cohen. I teach about the Gene Keys, other fun esoteric stuff. And today we're talking about one of the spheres along the Golden Path called the sphere of EQ. So the sphere prior to this is your IQ, and that links to the next sphere in the process, which is your EQ or your emotional quotient. And then it actually goes up. I'm going to draw it down for space purposes. And that then leads to our SQ, which is our spiritual quotient. Or another way to think about this is the degree to which your heart is able to open, or even your awareness around how your heart opens and how your heart closes. And I started here because it's important to understand this triad, because these two spheres really dictate what happens at this sphere here in your SQ. So another way to think about this is in the activation sequence, right? So we've got the sphere up top, if you're looking at your profile, is life's work. And then it connects down to your sphere of evolution. So if you're looking at your activation sequence, that's what you'll see. And this pathway here is called the pathway of challenge. Well, this pathway between IQ and EQ at the higher frequencies is the pathway of intelligence. And at the lower frequencies is the pathway of defense. And I'm sharing this with you because this pathway and this pathway, they're analogous to one another. So these two spheres are in our conscious control compared with the next two, the radiance and purpose, that are in our unconscious. Well, the same is true here for your IQ and your EQ. These are things that we have active awareness over, and it is a balancing between these two, using our intelligence, which is not our intellect. Our intellect is our mind. And if you're just using your intellect, you're going to be too heavily weighted on your EQ. We're also not solely feeling our way there, right? If we're only using our feelings, which is different from our heart, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. If we're only using our feelings, we're going to be too weighted in the EQ. So intelligence is a balancing. It's the heart mind. It's this sense of coherence that takes over our bodies, from which we are able to make calm, clear-minded, pure, and true decisions for ourselves. Or at the lower frequencies, it's this pathway of defense, which is, how can I guard myself? How can I protect myself? I'm out here alone. I need to struggle and fight against the world. The point here, though, is that if we can balance these two, we end up on this next pathway, and the activation sequence is the pathway of breakthrough. So in other words, getting these consciously, raising the frequency here, creates a breakthrough and allows the next sphere is our radiance to shine through in the activation sequence. Well, in the Venus work, which the EQ is a part of the Venus sequence, if we can balance our IQ and our EQ, then our SQ, we have this breakthrough and it opens, and it comes as a flood. So this is Richard, if you're not familiar with the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd is the creator of the system. I owe a lot to him for a lot of different reasons. But the flood is what happens when the heart opens. And he uses like these watery allegories through the Venus work, which I'm not going to get into too deeply now, but it's important to know that when the heart opens, it comes as a rush of love. All of a sudden, we put on this new pair of glasses and we're able to see things completely differently than we were able to see them before. But it doesn't necessarily come from focusing our attention on our SQ, on our spiritual intelligence, because that comes as a byproduct of focusing on your IQ and your EQ. So let's talk a little bit more now about the EQ itself and how I said that it is different than your heart is different from your emotions. So heart is not equal to emotions. So your emotions are passing. And I'm sure you've heard the analogy before. You've got this blue sky, and the emotions and thought forms, honestly, are these clouds that come in and they roll in and they take over, and it seems from the ground, it's all you can see. But if you're able to peel back, if you're able to get a layer deeper and you get above the clouds, the sun is always shining. So your emotional states are ultimately, from a teacher named Mickey Singer. If you've ever read Untethered Soul, and I'm drawing a blank on what the second one is, but the way that he describes emotion is that it is any time one of our sanskaras, these scars, think of it like that, these scars that we pick up throughout our lifetime, that basically we start to build our personality around. We take on these wounds, these sanskaras. And because we don't like how we feel when that wounding happened, we alter our behavior to avoid that thing being triggered again. But the world is set up to continuously bring these sanskaras out, because it is these sanskaras that are blocking the flow of energy within you. So God is like, we need to do some things, have some external circumstances show up so that this wound is triggered, so that it can be dealt with. Otherwise, it's just going to live inside of you forever, and you're never going to know what's in there, and you're never going to live up to your potential. So what Mickey Singer says when he talks about emotion is that an emotion is simply a sanskara getting touched. It's energy. You see that catch? That was smooth. It's energy flowing through a sanskara and getting refracted and shifting. And all of a sudden, we're not seeing the reality. We're instead seeing through the lens of whenever that sanskara was developed. And this also happens on the positive side. So on the positive side, something good happens in our lives, and then we have this sense of longing for it, and we'll do whatever we need to do to get more of that thing. But that's still not us. We're designed to let things come in and let them move out. It's a steady and consistent flow. And so our role or our job, instead of identifying with the emotions which come and go and shift and change always, and when you start to realize that is when you start to disidentify with the emotion itself and have an ability to remember, even in a highly charged emotional state, that you are more than that thing. And compare that with the heart, which ultimately is the seat of the self with a capital S. Your heart is your soul. It knows. Doesn't have to think about things. It doesn't feel into things. It just knows. And when we can learn to identify with our heart, then I'm able to really do what the Venus sequence teaches us to do, which is to return non-love with love. That takes a lot of work on oneself, a lot of work on understanding the universe. To return non-love with love means if somebody is screaming at you in anger, that you are able to have a level of awareness that allows you to take in what you need to take in from that and see and feel the truth of what is being said and return that energy from the heart instead of from the emotion. That's the challenge of the sphere of EQ, is learning how to subjugate what we believe is ourselves, but in actuality is this patchwork of sanskaras that we have built over time that is turned into our personality. Another thing that's maybe cool or important to know about the EQ is until we're identified with our heart instead of our feeling, we are going to be constantly dipping into what Richard calls the Eden loop. And this is a sequential triggering of our wounding, where I say something, typically from my intellect, that triggers the emotional wound, the EQ in the other person. And then they're upset. And so they say something from that wounded place, which then triggers my emotional wound. And then I'm wounded and I say something from that place that triggers an even deeper wound in the other. And we just spiral downward into this dangerous place. So let me talk about maybe those wounding patterns. So as I said, or maybe it was just in the picture, I can't remember if I haven't said it yet. This wound comes on sometime between the years of 7 to 14 years of age. So this is an emotional pattern that showed up when something extremely difficult happened over these years. So for me, my shadow is conflict. And if you know anything about my life, which I've shared on the channel before, I had a rough and tough upbringing. I grew up in a part of Boston that was pretty rough and tumble, and I was constantly fighting. So conflict was front and center in my life. And I believe with conflict that I need to protect myself at all costs. I used to go into every interaction and every exchange like a warrior. And I don't mean that in a pure sense. I mean that in like this is me, I'm going to fight for what's mine. This crazy, intense energy. And what do you think that led to time and time again? Is somebody else digging in and pushing back against me. Luckily, I'm a big dude. I'm 6'3". I'm 200 pounds. I have a really big energy and I would normally win. But at what cost? Telling you it was not worth it. And so this pattern of fighting, of constantly needing to bow up and look big at its root comes from my need or my perceived need to protect myself. But what Richard says in this gene key nearly exploded my mind is when you realize that you are connected to all things, who and what are you protecting yourself from? And this gene key, conflict, the gift here is diplomacy. And I'm only taking this a step farther because this 6th gene key is actually the representative gene key for the sphere of EQ. So I just happen to have this in my profile. Don't get confused. Doesn't mean that you need to have the 6th gene key in your EQ. It just means that the message of the 6th gene key shares the message of what the EQ represents. It means that we're moving from this energy of needing to go into everything with a sense of protection, needing to go in and make sure that you're safe and take what's yours at the sake of other people. And instead, we learn how to be diplomatic. We learn how to say the right things at the right times. And it doesn't mean that you don't still get what you want. It just means that you do it in a way that the other person also gets what they want. And so in this Eden loop, you are going back and forth between your 10-year-old version of yourself and a 10-year-old version of your partner self. No wonder you can never get anything done. Both of you are acting like children, literally. So I'll finish with this. Your EQ is holding back an absolute shit ton of energy. If you can release the need to go into things with this posture of conflict, the need to go into things with this protection mode, a flood, a rush of energy is going to be released back into you. This sphere, as well as the sphere of your evolution and the sphere of your culture, are the 3 places. So again, it's your EQ, your culture, and your evolution are the 3 places in your profile that if you can raise the frequency passing through there, things just flood in. You're going to have a giant paradigm shift. I promise you. So this is well worth your time, energy, and attention. Thank you for being here with me today. If you want to connect, I host a free call every couple of weeks. I'd love to see you there talking about the gene keys and other stuff. And I do this one-to-one and in small groups with people. If you're looking for something that is longer term, a deeper understanding, it's good to know this stuff. It's a totally different thing to be able to embody it in your life. We all need help through that process. And I think I can help. So thanks for being here. Talk to you next.